In the cold storage room that day, while I was bending down to lift frozen seafood crates, working tirelessly just to pay off my debts, the warehouse door suddenly creaked open. My boss, an old man with silver hair dressed in a neatly pressed suit but with eyes full of worry, stepped inside. He looked at me for a long time as if he wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. Then all of a sudden his voice trembled hoarsely. "Adonis, do you know who you are? I am your real father." I froze, my hands letting go of the crate, the sound of it crashing echoing through the warehouse. Stammering, I could hardly believe it. "Boss, what are you saying? Are you mistaken?" He took a step closer, his eyes red and teary. "I've been searching for you for the past 10 years. My whole body trembled, my legs giving way beneath me. From that moment on, everything in my life changed in ways I could never have imagined. Hello, my name is Adonis Reed. I'm 31 years old, living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm falling to the bottom of my life. It sounds dramatic, I know, but I don't know how else to describe it. All I know is that each day that passes, I feel like a tattered boat, battered by waves and washed ashore with no strength left to fight the current. The steakhouse I poured my heart and soul into building has gone bankrupt. Debts surround me like haunting shadows, and my wife, Isabella, has filed for divorce, taking our 5-year-old son, Jacob, and leaving the house that was once our home. This house used to be filled with laughter. I still remember Jacob's cheerful chatter about his day at school, the way he'd run around the dining table pretending to be a superhero. Isabella would be in the kitchen, the smell of grilled steak filling the house, and sometimes she'd turn around and smile at me. A smile that made me think I was the luckiest man alive. But now, everything is silent. The dishes are neatly stacked in the cupboard, untouched. The living room is cold, the dim yellow light casting shadows on empty walls. Where family photos once hung, now only rusted nails remain. Isabella took everything with her, both the happiness and the memories. I don't blame her. Honestly, if I were her, I'd probably leave too. My restaurant was losing money, the bank debts were piling up, and then there were the late-night arguments when I came home reeking of alcohol, mumbling apologies. I tried, I really did. But my efforts were like pouring water into a bucket with a hole. It didn't hold anything. Isabella said she was tired of carrying the weight of a husband who kept failing. "Adonis, you have to save yourself first," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes red, before she pulled her suitcase out the door. Jacob clung to my leg, crying, asking, "Dad, will you come play with me?" I nodded, but my throat was so tight I couldn't speak. I knew I wasn't worthy of being a father or a husband. Tonight I sit in an old armchair, a bottle of whiskey already half empty. Outside, the wind howls through the window, carrying the biting chill of Milwaukee's autumn. I look at the bottle, the light from the table lamp reflecting off the glass, as if mocking me. I don't know how many glasses I've had, but I know they don't help me forget my troubles. If anything, the alcohol makes everything clearer. My mistakes, my losses, and the endless conflicts between me and my wife. I pick up the phone and call my parents, Douglas and Francis. I know they're not the comforting type, but I feel so alone. When I tell them about the divorce and the restaurant's bankruptcy, my mother responds coldly, "Adonis, you deserve it. I told you not to dream of opening a restaurant. Now you've brought shame to the whole family." My father is even worse. He scoffs and says, "You're always just a drunken failure. Typical. Don't tell me you're calling to cry and beg for money. We have nothing for you." I hang up, my hands shaking, feeling like I've just been slapped in the face. My parents have never been a source of support for me, not ever. From a young age, I was used to being pushed aside, excluded from birthday parties, family outings, and words of praise. While my sister Erica was treated like a princess, I was always the faint shadow in the house. I take another sip of whiskey, the bitter taste sliding down my throat, dragging with it childhood memories I've tried to bury. I remember evenings spent alone in my room listening to the laughter of my family downstairs. They were playing family games, but no one called me to join. Once I stood outside the living room door, peeking through the crack, watching my father lift Erica up, my mother stroking her hair, both of them beaming. And me? I got cold glares when I accidentally spilled a glass of water, or remarks like, "Adonis, you're so clumsy," or "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I tried so hard to make them love me, to do well in school, to be good, but it was never enough. I was always the unwanted child, the one who didn't belong. I grew up starved for affection, like a stunted tree deprived of water. I craved recognition, love, but the harder I tried, the more I pushed myself down difficult paths. Opening the restaurant was my biggest dream. I wanted to prove to my parents, to the world, that I wasn't a failure. I took out loans, worked day and night, poured sweat and even blood, literally, when I once cut my hand in the kitchen, but gritted my teeth and kept going. But then the economy tanked, customers dwindled, and my restaurant collapsed. I lost everything: my dream, my family, and myself. Now, sitting in this empty house, I feel like a stranger in my own life. I look in the mirror and see a tired man with disheveled hair and dark circles under his eyes. "Who are you, Adonis?" I whisper to myself. I no longer recognize the man in the mirror. The man who used to dream big, laugh loudly, and carry Jacob to sleep on his shoulder. He's long gone. I stand up, stumbling to the balcony. The cold wind slaps my face as if trying to wake me from a trance. Under the faint glow of streetlights, the city of Milwaukee stretches out, peaceful but distant. I think of Jacob, of his big round eyes when he asked, "Dad, why is Mom sad?" I couldn't answer because I don't even understand what I did wrong. All I know is that I've failed once again, just like my parents always said. I once thought I was strong, that I could overcome anything, but now I just want to give up, to end it all. Maybe that's the only way to stop this pain. That night, the rain began to fall, each heavy drop pounding against the window, as if trying to shatter the silence of the house. I sat in the armchair, the whiskey bottle empty, but the pain still raw. I looked around, seeing the fragments of my life: the family photo that had been taken down, Jacob's little chair still sitting in the corner, and the wedding ring I still wore, though Isabella had long since removed hers. I stood up, stumbling, and grabbed the car keys. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to leave this place and end it all. I drove through the familiar streets of Milwaukee, the rain lashing against the windshield, blurring the streetlights. I didn't turn on the radio, not wanting to hear anything but the sound of the rain and my racing heartbeat. I thought of Jacob, of his bright, shining eyes, and suddenly I found myself stopping in front of the apartment building where Isabella and Jacob were living. I sat in the car, looking up at the third floor, where a warm golden light spilled from the window. Through the rain, I saw Jacob's small silhouette darting around the room, probably playing with his toys. His laughter echoed in my mind, though it was just my imagination. I smiled, a weak, painful smile. "At least you're still happy," I whispered, my voice breaking. I wanted to knock on the door, to hold Jacob one more time, but I didn't have the courage. I was afraid of seeing Isabella's disappointed eyes, afraid Jacob would ask questions I couldn't answer. I turned away, started the car, and drove off, leaving that warm light behind. I don't know how long I drove, only that I stopped at places that held the rare, beautiful memories of my life. First was the small diner on the corner where Isabella and I had our first date. I still remember her sitting across from me, wearing a pale blue dress, laughing brightly as I told a silly story from college. We ordered cheap burgers, drank soda from plastic cups, and I thought I'd spend my life making her happy. Now I stood outside the diner in the rain, looking through the fogged-up glass. Inside, other couples were laughing and talking, carefree like Isabella and I once were. I turned away, feeling like a knife was twisting in my heart. The rain grew heavier, but I didn't care. I drove out of the city to the big bridge on the outskirts. Old Mill Bridge, where the dark, inky river flowed below, deep and cold. I stopped the car, got out, and stood in the middle of the bridge, gripping the railing tightly. The rain stung my face, the wind howled in my ears, but I felt nothing but emptiness. I looked down at the water, imagining it sweeping me away, erasing all the pain, all the failures. My hands trembled, my fingers clutching the railing, then slowly loosening. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the edge. One more step, and it would all be over. Suddenly, a voice called out behind me, low and gentle, but strong enough to pull me from my trance. "Don't do it, son." I turned around, startled, and saw an old man standing a few steps away. He wore a dark overcoat, a fedora hat shielding half his face, but his eyes, deep, sad, and full of empathy, left me stunned. There was no judgment, no reproach, just a strange kind of pain, as if he understood me better than I understood myself. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice hoarse, my hands still clinging to the railing, as if it was the only thing anchoring me to this world. The old man gave a faint smile and stepped closer, keeping just enough distance so I didn't feel threatened. "Just a passerby," he said, his voice warm despite the relentless rain. "But I saw you and I thought, you shouldn't be here alone like this." I gave a bitter laugh. "You don't know me. I have nothing left to lose." The old man tilted his head, studying me closely as if searching for something in my eyes. "You're still alive, aren't you?" he said. "That means you still have a chance. Don't let the rain cloud that." I shook my head, anger mixed with despair rising inside me. "A chance? That's easy for you to say. What do you know about me? About what I've lost?" The old man didn't answer right away. He just stood there in the rain, his gaze never leaving me. "I don't know everything," he said slowly. "But I know what pain looks like. And I see it in your eyes. Don't let it win, son." His words hit me like a hammer, cracking the walls I'd built around myself. I wanted to scream, to tell him to leave me alone, but something in his voice, in his eyes, stopped me. I let go of the railing, stepped back, and felt my legs tremble. The rain kept falling, but for the first time in days I felt a faint glimmer of light, fragile as it was. "Come with me," the old man said, his voice low but gentle, pointing toward the warm golden light of a small cafe at the end of the bridge. "Just one cup of coffee. You don't have to be alone tonight." I looked at him, a stranger in the rain, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I nodded. Maybe because I had nothing left to lose. Maybe because in that moment I wanted to believe there was still something worth living for. I followed him, my shoes heavy with rainwater, each step pulling me away from the darkness in my mind. The small cafe was tucked along a quiet road, its light spilling through fogged-up windows like an oasis in the storm. Inside, the rich aroma of roasted coffee mingled with the soft hum of jazz music, creating a warm atmosphere that stood in stark contrast to the biting cold outside. I sat down at a small wooden table in the corner across from the old man. He took off his hat, revealing white hair and a weathered face, its wrinkles telling the story of a life full of storms. The server brought 2 steaming cups of coffee, the rising vapor softening the distance between us. "What's your name?" he asked, lifting his cup but keeping his eyes fixed on me. "Adonis," I replied, my voice hoarse as if I hadn't spoken to anyone in ages. "Adonis Reed." He nodded. "I'm Gregory," he said simply, then fell silent for a moment as if weighing something. "You don't have to tell me anything, Adonis. But if you're willing to listen, I have a story." I shrugged, unsure of what to say. I wasn't certain I wanted to hear it, but I also didn't want to return to that cold, empty house or face the dark thoughts waiting there. "All right," I said, taking a sip of coffee. The bitter taste spread through me, but it sharpened my senses. Gregory began to speak, his voice slow and deliberate, as if each word was carefully chosen. "I grew up in poverty in a small town a few hundred miles from here. Nothing but a rickety wooden house and endless days of grueling work at a lumber mill. When I was 25, I met the love of my life. Her name was Pamela. She had a smile as bright as the sun, and I thought that as long as I had her, I could overcome anything." He paused, his gaze drifting to some distant place I couldn't see. I stayed silent, listening, feeling as though his story was pulling me out of myself. But life wasn't easy, he continued. Pamela got pregnant and I was so happy I thought I could fly. But then she passed away during childbirth. A boy. I named him. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I lost her and all I had left was that baby boy. His voice caught and I saw his hands tighten around the coffee cup as if trying to hold on to something slipping away. A shiver ran through me, not from the cold but from the raw pain in his voice. It was too real, too close to what I was feeling. I tried to raise him, he said, his voice dropping lower. But I was exhausted. No money, no family, not even time to breathe. I worked day and night, but it was never enough. He was only 8 months old, so small, and I didn't know what to do. One night I stood outside a church holding him in my arms and he stopped, his eyes squeezing shut, as if the memory still pierced through him. I left him there, in a basket, with a note bearing his name. I thought someone would find him, give him a better life than I could. I sat still, my heart pounding. I didn't know why, but his story made me restless. Something in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at me, felt like I was brushing against a secret I wasn't ready to face. After that, I threw myself into work, Gregory went on, his voice steadier now but still heavy with pain. I built a seafood export company from nothing. Now I'm a millionaire with a big house, nice cars, everything people dream of. But not a single day passes that I don't think about that boy. Every time I see a child on the street, I wonder, where is my son now? Is he loved? Was he raised well? He looked directly at me and I felt my heart constrict. I've been searching for him, he said, his voice breaking. For the past 10 years, I've gone back to that church, asked around everywhere. But they said no baby was found that night. Maybe someone passing by took him, raised him as their own. I don't know. But I've never stopped hoping. I lowered my head, unable to meet his eyes. His story was like a mirror, reflecting my own pain. The pain of a father separated from his child, of someone longing for love they could never grasp. I thought of Jacob, of the days I couldn't be with him, and I felt a strange connection to this old man. But at the same time, something in me stirred, as if a puzzle piece was trying to find its place in my mind. I'm not telling you this to ask for pity, Gregory said, setting his coffee cup down. I'm telling you because I saw you on that bridge and I know you're in a place I've been. A place where everything feels meaningless. But you know what, Adonis? As long as you're alive, you still have a chance. You'll find the things that matter in your life again. His words were like a breeze blowing through my mind, gentle but strong enough to shake the walls I'd built around myself. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand, that I'd lost everything. But I couldn't. Something in his eyes and the story he told made me feel I wasn't alone. Before leaving, Gregory pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table. If you want to start over, he said, come to this company. I believe you're worth more than you think. I picked up the card, reading the words, Gregory Grayson, Grayson Seafood Exports, printed in black on white. I didn't say anything, just nodded. He stood, put on his hat, and walked out, leaving me with a cold cup of coffee and a faint spark of hope. That night, when I returned to the empty house, I didn't open a bottle of whiskey. I sat in the armchair, holding the business card, staring at it as if it were a ticket to a place I'd never dared to dream of. For the first time in days, I didn't think about death. Instead, I thought about Gregory, his deep, soulful eyes, and the story he told me on that cold bridge. There was something in his voice, in the way he looked at me, that made me feel I still had some worth, even if just a little. I placed the business card on the table next to the lonely wedding ring and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of nightmares. The next morning, I stood in front of the Grayson Seafood Exports building, a company on the edge of Milwaukee where cargo ships bustled in and out of the port. The building wasn't overly flashy, but it exuded solidity, with its red brick walls and gleaming glass doors. I wore an old suit and told myself this was just an opportunity, not a promise. I didn't expect much, but at the very least I wanted to try. Just this once. After the interview, Gregory arranged a small position for me in the warehouse, working alongside the dock workers and inventory clerks. The job was demanding, hauling heavy crates of frozen fish, the salty smell of the sea clinging to my clothes, and long days under cold fluorescent lights. But I didn't complain. I worked hard, meticulously logging each shipment, helping my colleagues when they needed it. I didn't want anyone to see me as a failure anymore. Every drop of sweat that hit the warehouse floor was a reminder that I was still alive, that I could still do something. After just a few weeks, I started receiving nods of approval from my coworkers. "You're doing great, Adonis," a guy named Mike said, clapping me on the shoulder after I helped him unload a heavy shipment. "Keep it up and you'll be in the office in no time." I smiled, shook my head, but inside I felt a spark of warmth. It had been so long since anyone had praised me. Those small words were like drops of water nourishing a barren patch of soil within me. The strange thing was Gregory. He showed up at the warehouse often, even though people said he rarely came down to this area. A man like him, a millionaire, the company owner, should have been in an air-conditioned office signing contracts and meeting partners. Yet there he was, chatting with the workers, asking about their tasks, and in particular keeping an eye on me. Once I caught him standing in a corner of the warehouse watching me as I checked inventory. His gaze wasn't supervisory, it was more like he was searching for something. I didn't understand, but every time I met his eyes I felt an odd connection, as if he saw something in me that I couldn't see myself. I started to feel like Grayson Seafood Exports was a second home. Here, no one knew about my failed past, my bankrupt restaurant, or my broken marriage. They only saw Adonis, the hard-working guy who was always ready to lend a hand. Each day I regained a piece of the confidence I'd lost. I was no longer the loser sitting in an empty house clutching a bottle of whiskey and mourning what was gone. I was Adonis Reed, someone trying step by step to stand back up. Gregory grew closer to me as well. He'd call me into his office, not to check on my work, but to talk. He asked about my life, about the dreams I once had. I told him about Jacob, how he loved hearing stories about knights and dragons, about his smile when I pushed him on the swing. Gregory listened, nodded, and sometimes I saw a flicker of indescribable sadness in his eyes. "You're a good father, Adonis," he said once, his voice low and steady. "Don't ever let anyone make you think otherwise." Those words hit me deeper than I expected. I wanted to believe him, but the wounds in my heart were still there, reminding me that I'd failed Jacob, Isabella, and myself. One afternoon, the Milwaukee sky was unusually clear, free from the biting chill of rainy days. I was in the warehouse helping a group of workers unload a shipment of frozen salmon. The work was grueling, my shirt soaked with sweat, so I took off my jacket, leaving just a thin tank top. I didn't pay attention to my surroundings, focusing only on lifting each crate and stacking them neatly on the shelves. The sound of my coworkers' laughter filled the air, the atmosphere lighter than usual. Then I heard familiar footsteps. Gregory. "Adonis, you're doing great," he said, standing a few steps away, hands in the pockets of his overcoat. I turned, smiling, about to thank him. But then I saw his face change. His eyes widened, his lips trembled as if he'd just seen a ghost from the past. He stepped forward slowly, his gaze fixed on my shoulder. I looked down, following his eyes, and realized he was staring at the small star-shaped birthmark on my left shoulder. A mark I'd had since birth, one I'd never paid much attention to. "My God," Gregory whispered, his voice choking, his eyes brimming with tears. "It's you." The air in the warehouse seemed to freeze. My coworkers stopped talking, stopped working, their curious gazes turning toward us. I stood there, bewildered, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling, not understanding what was happening. Gregory stepped closer, his hand shaking as it reached toward my shoulder, but he stopped as if afraid of startling me. "Adonis," he said, his voice breaking. This birthmark, I've seen it before. On the shoulder of a baby, the son I left behind. I stepped back, my mind reeling. No, it can't be, I muttered, feeling the floor beneath me crumble. But Gregory's eyes, filled with pain and hope, held me in place. I wanted to run, to scream that he was mistaken, that this was just a ridiculous coincidence. But the birthmark on my shoulder, that small, star-shaped mark I'd never paid much attention to, now felt like an accusation, an invisible thread pulling me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. Adonis, Gregory said, his voice trembling as he stepped closer. His eyes were blurred with tears streaming down his weathered face. You're my son. I know it. This birthmark, I saw it when you were a baby, when I... He paused, his voice choking as if the words were stuck in his throat. When I left you behind. The warehouse fell into a suffocating silence. My co-workers, who had been laughing and chatting just minutes ago, now stood frozen, their eyes a mix of curiosity and awkwardness. My head pounded, my heart hammering as if it might burst through my chest. What are you talking about? I stammered, my voice faltering. My parents are Douglas and Francis. They raised me. I'm not your son. But even as I said those words, I knew something was off. Memories of my childhood, the cold glares, the biting remarks, the distance from my parents, flooded my mind, sharp as a knife's edge. I'd always felt like I didn't belong, like a misplaced puzzle piece in their family picture. But to accept that they weren't my real parents, that the man standing before me, a millionaire company owner, was my biological father, that was too much to bear. Gregory dropped to his knees, heedless of the dusty warehouse floor or the staring eyes around us. He covered his face, tears falling, his voice breaking. I was wrong, Adonis. I abandoned you. It's a wound I've carried my whole life. I thought you'd have a better life, but I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stood there, frozen, feeling like the world was unraveling. I wanted to yell at him, to demand why he'd left me, why he'd let me grow up in disdain and loneliness. But I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry and my heart ached with a strange mix of pain and longing. A longing to believe I had a real father, one who was crying for me, begging for my forgiveness. I want to make it right, Gregory said, standing up, his voice shaking but resolute. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but let me be there for you, Adonis. Give me a chance. I shook my head, not out of rejection, but because I didn't know what to do. My mind was a tangled mess. I needed answers, not from Gregory, but from the people who raised me, Douglas and Francis. I needed to know the truth, to understand why they'd treated me like a burden for 31 years. I have to go, I said, my voice hoarse. I need to see my parents. Gregory nodded, his eyes full of concern but also determination. I'll go with you, he said, if you'll let me. I looked at him, this man who just moments ago was my boss, a kind stranger. Now he stood there, a piece of a past I'd never known. I nodded, unsure why I agreed. Maybe I just needed someone by my side, even if only to face the storm ahead. That afternoon, I drove to the old house in the suburbs of Milwaukee where I grew up with Douglas, Francis, and my sister Erica. Gregory sat in the passenger seat, silent throughout the drive, but I could feel the tension in his every breath. The house came into view just as it was when I left it. Faded gray shingles, a rickety wooden fence, and a patchy lawn overgrown with weeds. It had never been a warm place, but now it looked even colder, like a shadow of my past. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding as if it might burst. Frances opened it, her face hardening, her cold eyes sweeping over me. "Adonis," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "What are you doing here?" Then she glanced over my shoulder, saw Gregory standing behind me and frowned. "Who's this?" I didn't answer, pushing past her into the house, Gregory following quietly. Douglas was in the armchair, the flickering light of the TV illuminating his face. He glanced at me, his lips curling into a mocking sneer. "Oh, the prodigal son returns. Here to beg for money?" I stood tall, Meeting their eyes, my voice cold but laced with years of pain. I'm not here for money. I'm here for the truth. Why did you always treat me like I was unwanted? Why did I never feel loved like Erica? Why did I never feel like your son? Frances gave a scornful laugh, crossing her arms, her eyes sharp and cold. Always so dramatic, Adonis. What do you want? An apology for being a failure? We raised you, that's enough. Douglas nodded, adding in a mocking tone, You're always causing trouble. Don't act like we didn't give you enough. I clenched my fists, anger flaring like a fire, but before I could respond, Gregory stepped forward, his posture straight, his eyes burning with intensity. Enough, he barked, his deep voice ringing with authority. I'm Gregory Grayson, Adonis's biological father. I left him at a church doorstep 31 years ago. I know you took him in. Don't deny it. Tell the truth. The air in the room seemed to vanish, heavy and suffocating. Frances flinched, her eyes widening, her trembling hands clutching the edge of the table as if she needed it to stay upright. What are you talking about? She stammered, her voice high-pitched with shock. But her eyes darted away from me as if hiding something. Douglas shot to his feet, his face pale, then flushing red, his finger jabbing at Gregory, his voice trembling with panic. What kind of nonsense is this? You can't just barge in here and say crazy things like that. But his voice faltered, his eyes darting nervously as if scrambling to cover a secret laid bare. Admit it, I snapped, my voice breaking with a mix of anger and pain. I'm not your real son, am I? Tell me. I need to hear the truth from your own mouths. Frances turned away, her lips pressed tight, but Douglas, after a long, oppressive silence, let out a heavy sigh, as if the weight of the truth had finally crushed him. Fine, he said, his voice cold and unrepentant. We found you at the church. A baby nobody wanted, left in a tattered basket with a note bearing your name. We took you in, raised you, but you were always a burden. You're not our blood, so don't expect us to love you like we love Erica. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. I'd suspected it, braced myself for it, but hearing the truth laid bare still left me reeling. I glanced at Gregory, saw him lower his head, his shoulders trembling with anger and regret. You, he said, his voice choked. You had the chance to love my son, but you chose to treat him like this. It's my fault, but you're guilty too. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and walked out of the house, unable to hear another word. Gregory ran after me, calling my name. Adonis, wait! He placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with pain. You don't have to face this alone anymore. From now on, I'll be here for you. I looked at him, this man who was my real father, the one who'd abandoned me but now stood here, begging for a chance. I need time, I said, my voice breaking. I need to think. Gregory nodded, not pressing me further. I walked away, leaving him standing there in the weedy garden under Milwaukee's gray sky. In the days that followed, I lived like a shadow. I still went to work at Grayson Seafood Exports, still checked inventory, still laughed and talked with colleagues. But my mind was elsewhere. Gregory gave me space and time to make my decision. Each night I sat in my empty house asking myself, could I forgive? Could I accept the man who had abandoned me, leaving me to grow up under the disdain of Douglas and Frances? But then I thought of Gregory's eyes, the way he told stories, the deep regret etched into every wrinkle on his face. He wasn't heartless. He too had suffered loss, pain, and carried wounds that would never heal. Gregory still showed up at the warehouse, still asked about my work, but never pressured me to forgive. Instead, he sent me small things as if trying to reach my heart from a distance. One afternoon, I found an envelope left on my desk, written in his trembling handwriting. Inside was an old, faded photograph of a young woman with a radiant smile. On the back, he wrote, "This is your mother, Pamela. She would be so proud of you." I held the photo, my fingers tracing the face of the woman I never knew, and felt a wave of emotion surge within me. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened. Then more letters came, not regularly, but each one was a piece of the past. Gregory wrote about the days he and Pamela were in love, their simple dreams, and how he fell apart when Pamela passed away. "I wrote these letters to you years ago," he wrote in one. "I just wanted you to know that not a single day has passed without me thinking of you." Those words were like droplets of water, slow but persistent, melting the ice around my heart. One evening, I sat in an armchair holding Pamela's photo and reread Gregory's latest letter. He described the night he left me at the church gate, how he stood in the darkness crying like a child but believed it was the best choice for me. "I was wrong," he wrote, "but I never stopped loving you." I folded the letter, tears streaming down my cheeks. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just the man who abandoned me. He was also a father who lost his child, a man carrying pain no less than my own. I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and drove to Gregory's house. It was a large home in the suburbs, shaded by oak trees with glowing glass windows. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding, unsure of what I would say. Gregory opened the door, dressed in a simple shirt, his eyes a mix of surprise and hope. "Adonis," he said, his voice trembling. "You came." I didn't let him finish. I stepped forward, looked into his eyes, and softly said, "Father." Just one word, but it carried a lifetime of turmoil, wounds, and hope. Gregory's eyes welled up, and he stepped forward to embrace me, his arms so tight I could feel his heartbeat, as if he feared I might vanish. "My son," he whispered, his voice choked. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance." We stood there in the wide hallway, two men separated for 31 years, now reconnected by a fragile but resilient bond. I said nothing more, but in that moment I knew I had forgiven. Not because I forgot the pain, but because I wanted to free myself. From then on, my life turned a new page. Gregory introduced me to everyone at the company, not just as an employee, but as his son, the future heir of Grayson Seafood Exports. Colleagues who once joked with me now looked at me with a mix of surprise and respect. I was no longer Adonis Reed, the failure with a bankrupt restaurant. I was Adonis Grayson, the man trusted by his father, rebuilding himself from the ashes. Gregory supported me not just in work, but in spirit. He taught me how to run the company, how to negotiate with partners, but more importantly, he taught me to believe in myself. "You have talent," he said once, as we sat in his office overlooking the Milwaukee harbor. "You just need a chance to prove it." Those words were like a flame warming me through the coldest days. I began taking part in the company's major projects, from market expansion to improving production processes. Each step was a challenge, but also an opportunity to regain confidence in myself. I no longer ran from painful memories, but used them as fuel to move forward. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could write my future. Deep down, I felt Pamela's presence, the mother I never met. I kept her photo in my wallet, a reminder that I was born from love, even if it was cut short too soon. Each time I looked at her smile, I felt stronger, as if she were watching, proud of the man I was becoming. That night, after meeting Gregory, I called Isabella and asked to see Jacob that weekend. "I'm changing," I said, my voice sincere. "I want to be a better father to our son." She was silent for a moment, then agreed. It was a small but meaningful first step toward rebuilding my relationship with my son. I hung up, sat back in the armchair, and felt as if a heavy stone had been lifted from my chest. For the first time in months, I saw a faint light at the end of a long, dark road. I closed my eyes, picturing Jacob's smile, and promised myself I wouldn't let him grow up lacking love as I had. But life, as I had learned, never lets you stay at peace for too long. The news that I was the son of Gregory Grayson, the millionaire behind Grayson Seafood Exports, spread like wildfire through the old Milwaukee neighborhood. I didn't know who had talked. Perhaps it was a colleague from the warehouse or an acquaintance who overheard something. But just a few weeks later, as I was beginning to settle into my new rhythm, working alongside my real father and spending afternoons thinking about Jacob, the door to my past swung open with cruel force. One evening, as I returned home from the company, there was an urgent knock at the door. I opened it to find Francis and Douglas, the people I once called parents who raised me but never truly loved me. Francis wore her old, worn sweater, her eyes glinting with a mix of awkwardness and greed. Douglas stood behind her, hands in his pockets, but I saw him glancing around my house as if calculating how much money I might have. "Adonis," Francis said, her voice sickeningly sweet, a tone I'd never heard from her before. "Can we come in? We need to talk." I gripped the door handle tightly as a flood of painful childhood memories rushed back, but I nodded, saying nothing, and let them step inside. They sat on the sofa, Francis fidgeting with her hands while Douglas cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. I stood across from them, arms crossed, waiting. "We heard about your situation," Francis began, her voice cautious. "About Mr. Grayson. About you being his son. It's incredible, Adonis. We're happy for you." "Happy?" I gave a bitter laugh, my voice laced with resentment. "Are you happy I found my real father, or happy because you think I'm rich now?" Douglas frowned, his face reddening. "Don't talk to your mother like that," he snapped, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We raised you, Adonis. Without us, you'd have starved on the streets." I felt the blood rush to my head, but I held myself back, taking a deep breath. "Raised me? You call mocking me, pushing me aside, treating me like a burden, raising me? You never made me feel like I was your son." Francis started crying, but I knew those weren't tears of remorse. She wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "Adonis, we're old now. No one takes care of us. Erica's busy with her own family, and we have nothing. You're the son of a millionaire now. Can't you help us? After all, we raised you. That's worth something, isn't it?" Her words cut like a knife, but not because I was heartbroken. I was angry. Angry at their shamelessness, angry that they dared use the past to manipulate me. I remembered the nights spent alone in my room, hearing their laughter with Erica downstairs. The times I was scolded for spilling a glass of water. The birthdays without cake, without gifts, without even a hug. Worth something. Their worth left me with scars that would never heal. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang urgently, cutting through the stifling tension in the room. I frowned, walked to the door, my heart pounding with a bad feeling. Gregory stood there, his face etched with worry, his sharp eyes glancing over my shoulder at Francis and Douglas, who sat frozen on the sofa. He still wore his dark overcoat, his hands clenched as if he'd rushed here. "Adonis," he said, his voice low but resolute. "I heard they were here. I couldn't let you face them alone. I want to be here if you need me." His presence made Francis pale, while Douglas jumped up, pointing at him, his voice trembling with anger and confusion. You're the one who abandoned this boy, and now you show up playing the perfect father? What a joke!" But Gregory's icy, authoritative gaze silenced him. I felt the strength radiating from my real father, and in that moment I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Gregory didn't respond immediately. He stepped inside, stood beside me, and placed a hand on my shoulder. A firm gesture, as if to say I was no longer alone. "I was wrong to abandon Adonis," he said, his voice low but sharp. "That's a wound I'll carry for life. But you had the chance to love him, to raise him. You chose to treat him cruelly, and now you dare come here to make demands? Don't even think about exploiting my son again." I looked at Gregory, feeling the strength from the father I once thought I'd never have. Then I turned to Francis and Douglas, the people who turned my childhood into a chain of pain. "Raising someone should come with love," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But for 31 years, I never felt that from you. I've had enough. From now on, I choose my real family." Francis sobbed louder, but I knew it was just an act. "Adonis, you're ungrateful. We gave you everything," she cried, her voice breaking, no longer convincing. Douglas just stood there, face flushed but speechless. I opened the door, gesturing for them to leave. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice steady. Go and don't come back." They left, Francis still muttering accusations while Douglas walked silently, head bowed. When the door closed, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. I turned to Gregory, who stood there, his eyes filled with pride and pain. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice warm. "You're stronger than I thought." I nodded, saying nothing, but in my heart I knew I had just severed the final tie to my painful past. I was no longer the child desperate for love from people who never gave it. I was Adonis Grayson, with a father standing behind me, ready to protect me. For the first time, I felt I truly had a foundation, a home. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work at Grayson Seafood Exports with newfound energy. Gregory was not only my father, but also my mentor, my guide. He taught me how to read financial reports, negotiate with major partners, and most importantly, trust my own instincts. "You have a practical mind, Adonis," he said once as we sat in his office. "That's something you can't learn. Use it." Those words, simple but sincere, were like a balm, healing the wounds of self-doubt I had carried for so long. I began leading larger projects within the company. One of my first challenges was expanding the market to nearby cities, where demand for high-quality seafood was surging. I proposed a bold plan, partnering with local restaurants to supply fresh salmon and shrimp at competitive prices while building the Grayson brand as a symbol of quality. Gregory supported me, even though some senior managers were skeptical at first. "He's only been with the company a short time," one said during a meeting, his eyes scrutinizing me. But Gregory just smiled and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Adonis is my son, and I trust him." That trust was the greatest motivation. I worked day and night, researching markets, meeting partners, and inspecting every shipment to ensure quality. When the first contracts were signed and revenue began to climb, I saw the surprise in my colleagues' eyes turn to respect. They started calling me Little Grayson, not out of mockery, but as a mark of recognition. But even as my career flourished, a void lingered in my heart. Jacob. Isabella still kept her distance, worried that my past failures would affect our son. I didn't blame her. I knew I had once been a terrible husband and father, letting alcohol and self-doubt drag me to rock bottom. But I was different now. I wanted Jacob to see that, to know that his father was still here, loving him more than anything in the world. I started with the smallest steps. The first weekend, I took Jacob to the park. The 5-year-old stepped out of Isabella's apartment with big round eyes and a hint of wariness. "Dad," he said in a tiny voice, "Mom said you're working at a new place?" I nodded, smiling, trying to hide the wave of emotion in my chest. "Yeah, I work at a big company now, but today I just want to hang out with you." We strolled through the park, where oak trees cast dappled shadows and birds chirped alongside children's laughter. I pushed Jacob on the swing, hearing him laugh louder each time he soared higher. "Faster, Dad!" he shouted, and I laughed, feeling my heart melt. Later, we sat on a bench eating vanilla ice cream, and I told him the story of the knight and the dragon he used to love. Jacob listened, his eyes sparkling, but I still sensed an invisible wall between us, the consequence of the months I hadn't been there for him. But I stayed patient. Every weekend, I took Jacob out, never pushing him to talk about things he wasn't ready for. We visited a children's bookstore where I bought him a superhero comic. We ate burgers at a small diner where I used to take Isabella on dates. I didn't talk about money or boast about the company or my new success. I just wanted Jacob to feel that his dad was still here, still loved him, despite everything that had changed. At first, Jacob was shy, quiet, his eyes sometimes avoiding mine. But gradually, he began to open up. One afternoon, as we sat by the Milwaukee River, skipping stones across the water, Jacob suddenly grabbed my hand. "Dad," he said, his voice small but clear, "I missed you." I turned to him, seeing his big round eyes looking at me, no longer wary but full of trust. I pulled him into a tight hug, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I missed you too, Jacob," I whispered. "I'll never leave you again." That moment was like a remedy, healing every wound within me. I knew I still had a long way to go to rebuild trust with Jacob and Isabella, but I was ready. I was no longer the broken, self-doubting man of the past. Gregory watched it all from a distance. Once, while I was taking Jacob to the park, my phone buzzed. A message from him appeared on the screen. "You're doing well, Adonis. I didn't just find you again. I'm watching you become the father I never had the chance to be. I'm proud of you." Reading that, my chest tightened. Those words reached deep into the part of me that had once longed for validation. I looked up at Jacob laughing under the oak trees, my eyes blurring but my lips curling into a faint smile. For the first time, I texted back, "Thank you, Dad." No longer forced, no longer hesitant. Just a natural call from the heart. Even through the words on a screen, I knew we had found each other again through love and forgiveness. That night, I returned home holding Pamela's photo, my mother, and gently touched her smile. I knew she was watching, and I hoped she was proud. My life, once shattered, was being rebuilt day by day, moment by moment. I no longer ran from the past, but used it as a foundation to move forward, with Jacob by my side, Gregory behind me, and the belief that I was worthy of love. In the months that followed, I continued to build my career at Grayson Seafood Exports. With Gregory's support, I led the company's expansion into new markets from Chicago to Minneapolis, and the Grayson name became increasingly recognized as a symbol of quality and trust. Partners began seeking me out, not just because I was Gregory's son, but because they saw my dedication and sharp thinking. Each signed contract, each successful project was a brick in the foundation of the new me, Adonis Grayson. A man no longer defined by failures or the disdain of the past. But success at work wasn't what fulfilled me most. The most precious moments were those I spent with Jacob. Every weekend I took him out, and slowly the wall between us crumbled. I brought him to the park where we skipped stones across the river, laughing as they created shimmering ripples. I read him stories, growling like the dragon from his favorite tales, and each time I heard his laughter, I felt my heart heal a little more. Isabella began to soften as well. She no longer kept her distance as before and even invited me to stay for dinner once when I dropped Jacob off. "You've changed, Adonis," she said, her eyes gentler. "Jacob needs you." Those words, though simple, were the greatest gift I'd ever received. One autumn afternoon, I took Jacob to the Grayson Seafood Exports office. He looked around curiously, pointing at the large crates and asking me everything from where salmon lived to why ships were so big. Gregory appeared, dressed in a simple suit, and knelt down before Jacob, smiling. "You're Jacob, right?" he said warmly. "Your dad's told me a lot about you." Jacob nodded shyly, then suddenly grabbed my hand as if to make sure I was still there. I looked at Gregory, then at Jacob, and felt a warm current connecting 3 generations of us. 3 generations once torn apart by loss, now bound together by love and understanding. Gregory took Jacob to see a cargo ship, explaining how the company worked while I stood at a distance, smiling. I saw Gregory's eyes light up as he talked to Jacob, as if he were reliving the years he'd lost with me through his grandson. In that moment, under the fiery sunset over Milwaukee's harbor, I realized that family isn't just about blood. Family is where there is love, where you are accepted and cherished, no matter your past. That night, I sat alone in the living room holding Pamela's photo and wrote a letter to myself, a habit I'd learned from Gregory. "Adonis," I wrote, "blood can be lost, but true family is where there is love and understanding. Never underestimate a child, for the wounds of childhood can ruin their entire life. And never give up, because even in despair, you can find a reason to keep living." I folded the letter, placed it next to Pamela's photo, and felt my heart lighten as if I'd released the final burden into the river of my life. My journey isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. There are still days when I wake up with old pain, moments when I wonder if I'm truly worthy of this happiness. But every time I look into Jacob's eyes, every time I hear Gregory call me son, I know I've found a reason to keep going. I've learned to forgive, not to forget the pain, but to free myself from it. I've learned to love not just others, but myself. If I could send a message to anyone lost in their own darkness, it would be this: cherish family, but have the courage to walk away from toxic relationships. Money can bring comfort, but only love and care create a true home. No matter how painful the past, the future can be rewritten if you're brave enough to move forward. I did it, and I believe you can too. I stood up, stepped onto the balcony, and looked at the starry Milwaukee night sky. A gentle breeze carried the scent of the sea from the distant harbor. I smiled, whispering softly to Pamela, to Jacob, to Gregory, and to myself. Thank you for giving me a chance to keep living. Then I turned back inside, ready for tomorrow. Another day to live, to love, and to become the best version of myself.